Welcome, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today, I have the fabulous honour and privilege of conversing and interviewing with the founders and vision holders of Carbonate and also the National Regenerative Agriculture Day, which happens to be the 14th of February. So they are hijacking Valentines Day, which I think is totally an awesome idea because we need to be sending lots and lots of love to our soil and our farmers, because all that love gets put into our food that we consume in our body and it becomes part of us. So what an amazing initiative. So today, Helen and Kelly are going to be sharing how NRAD, I quite like the abbreviation, NRAD, was birthed, their vision, and how we can all get involved, and also how perhaps they can inspire you if you're a disruptor and a rebel and you want to start your own national day. They have quite a few tips which they want to share with you today. So welcome, Helen and Kelly. To begin with, I would love for you to share a little bit about yourselves, of course, and we're going to do this organically because, of course, Carbonate and the National Regenerative Agriculture Day don't use any chemicals, so they're very organic. So this is going to be an organic conversation. And of course, where the idea for NRAD came from.
Yeah, I reckon you could start with that intro there, Miss McCosker. I remember, what do you remember of the beginning of NRAD?
Oh gosh, I remember sitting around a kitchen table because that's where all great ideas come from, around the kitchen table. And we were in the middle of a drought back in 2018.
Yeah,
I think 2018. Yeah. And it was actually you birthed the idea. You said, well, why don't we just set up a day? And I said, well, how hard could that be? It can't be that hard, surely.
I remember you had gone to, so we live in the rural belt of New South Wales, and you had gone to one of the little towns or villages, I would say, called Ashford near Wallingra, where Helen and Mike live, and it's only a little village of 500 people. And obviously with the drought, we systematically watched all of our little villages and rural townships sort of get smashed and shut down. And it's really quite an apocalyptic experience. You start watching everything die just on the real grass level, and then the vegetables die, and then the fruit trees die, and then you start watching the much older established trees die. And then the cultural impact of that was, the schools started shutting down, and the pubs started shutting down, and the real basic infrastructure of these tiny little villages, because people couldn't afford to stay there anymore. They were really highly impacted by the drought. And I remember you coming back, Miss McCosker, and you'd been at the little post office bakery, which was one of the only businesses still operating. And there was a little jar, wasn't there?
Yeah, it was. It was so amazing. I just went in to get a cup of coffee, and there was this jar, just this little, those Rosella jars with all those old style Rosella jars, and it had about $5 $50 notes in there, and there was a little sign down the bottom saying, support our farmers in drought. And I was so moved. I actually, it brought tears to my eyes. I just thought, wow, this community they're actually the lowest socioeconomic town in Australia, have very little money, and people were putting their hands in their pockets to put, $50 in this jar. And so that, I think it was the next morning, Kel came over and we just sat down, and I was so moved by it. And Kelly's like, okay, well, we need to create awareness, because it's all, one of the things was that we were seeing the unfolding of the support for farmers. So, over $100 million of drought aid came from city people really wanting to help farmers. And the thing was that all of that that money initially went into that first responder type scenario, that emergency response of food packages for farmers and buyer bail. And obviously that's really important when your back's against the wall. But because we know so much about soil health and soil biology, and looking, that concept of getting out of the drought better than we went in. So we sat down and went, right, well, what can we do to create awareness around regenerative agriculture? Because it's not just even awareness of farmers, it's actually foodies, the foodies that are purchasing the food can create really big signals to farmers and make the change in terms of the what they receive, like increase the value, the perception, and so farmers could become more profitable by getting foodies to really engage and support farmers in that way.
Yeah.
So we sat down and started sort of planning it out, and it happened so quickly, didn't it? It was really like fluid. And
I mean, you were really moved by seeing people give in a situation where they had the least to give. And when it came to the drought, it was really interesting because we all lived it. And we all watched sort of the process, and we watched this income coming in from, these commitments from the government coming in. And honestly, like not $1 got spent on what causes drought and how can we solve it. Like it was like a given part of the Australian story that we just have drought, and that's just the way it is. And that's how it's always going to be, this sunburnt country. And not $1 or cent went into actually, can this be solved? And if the answer is yes, which is what we sat down to look at, can we solve drought? Can we get the farmer, their family, and their community out of drought better than they went in? That was our original intention with NRAD and Carbonate. And we sat down, and of course, the answer is to heal the soil. And we stand here, 4 years later in 2022, and it's gone from drought to flooding. And the same principle applies. Like, can we get out of flooding better than we went in? And the answer is yes, heal the soil. So we suddenly had a very tangible solution to a drought. And we hadn't come across another organization sort of really partnering the concept of getting out of a drought with regenerative agriculture, not to the same emotionally, personally involved place that we were all in, which we were all at the sort of tail end of. It had been like almost two years then that we hadn't seen rain, and and our whole communities were being affected. So we literally watched all this money coming in from the government, and it went to community infrastructure, which is like nice and everything, fixing up solar panels on the CWA kitchens, and that's all really productive stuff. But that does not address how to get out of drought better than when you went in. So, and we basically, when we started this, there was nothing. Like, we sat down and said, okay, well, what is regenerative agriculture? I'd never heard of it before. Helen and Mike had lived it in their own practices and had been very strong at championing it, but it was all brand new to me. And I had to sit there and, basically listen to Mike, who is Helen's husband and the co-founder in Carbonate and NRAD, and just basically try to get it into my head, like really simply, what is regenerative agriculture? And it was brilliant because I'm an artist, and what I had to do then was take Mike's semi-complex ideas and scientific terminology and translate it to sort of fast food English that someone like me who knew nothing about it could understand and then respond to it and actually be inspired by it. So when we started, there was no graphical content for what is carbon. Like, hello, who the hell has an answer to that? We didn't know what is carbon. What does that look like? What's our visual on that? How do we respond to the idea of regenerative agriculture in any sort of media play? Like, how do we present it? How do we draw this? How do we rally people behind this idea if no one even knows about it or understands it, and the only access we have are like kind of dusty old thick books that textbooks that are really hard to read and pretty dull and dry, whereas it's a most extraordinary topic. There's so much gold in this topic. It's so juicy that our job was to like, how do we sort of sex this up a bit? How do we like bring some rock and roll to Regen Ag? How do we like get people's consciousness here and actually have them go, holy moly, that is so amazing. Like, how have I not known this? It makes so much sense.
Yeah. And I think even from my experience so I live on a 3,000 acre farm in northern New South Wales. We call our farm heaven on earth. And and I think that, having gone through a drought, and I'm very much passionate about community and community resilience. And also, having 4 young kids at the time when we were going through the drought. And I have a really deep love of music and the arts. So we felt like that there was a real way to engage our community through, getting through this big mental health thing, of providing some really amazing events within our community to bring everyone out and just try and really sort of connect them to their heart space. And this was probably how we actually could really see that lens of going, well, if we want to share our story and we want to engage people in really amazing ways, it's actually through beauty and the arts. I mean, I know, and particularly when you're in drought and you see this terrible, brittle environment that is so brown, day after day after day, you're hanging up the clothes on the line and you're just looking up in the sky going, oh my God, I cannot see a cloud in the sky. And it's just, gosh, even the memory of it just really, it's very emotional process for farmers and families having to go through that. So
there's no end. There's no end.
So I think that one of the things that we really saw was that engagement of art, and I think that probably became the cornerstone of all the work that we did. The start of National Regen Ag Day, it was just about connecting to the heart space, beauty, and connecting communities. So that was sort of like the pattern integrity, if we will, on how we sort of work through this. I think, Kel, would you agree?
Yeah, I would totally agree. It just happened to be a happy coincidence that Helen, Mike, and I had met several years earlier. I had a little farm about 20 minutes down the road, and we met because Helen and Mike. This preceded the drought. This was like a littler drought before this epic drought. And you decided that you wanted to rejuvenate and regenerate the local community hall, which had been once a thriving community and culture and had been sitting there dormant for many, many, almost decades. And so Helen and Mike approached me to sort of do the marketing design work for that. And so that's sort of where we started as far as getting to know each other as founders in a work capacity. And then from there, it just was so obvious because we had such a successful event inspiring the community to come together behind music and the arts. And we watched firsthand the power of bringing all that creativity to solving a problem within our own area. And we watched that. So we were alive with that wisdom, I guess. So when it came to the drought, our first go-to intention was, how can we apply that same principle where we actually inspire people with the beauty of it and with the creativity of it and with the language and the sound and feel of it, as opposed to just presenting the information. And it was such a really beautiful mirror, because if you think about soil and soil health and soil biology and diversity, so what we were doing was sort of like, the more diversity you bring in, and you actually start bringing in more resilience. So that was a really beautiful mirror of nature, and I think that whole thing of expressing nature as best we can, that was another really important part of our sort of the way that we work with NRAD. It was it was like, we didn't really have a plan, did we, Cal? We just we sort of jumped in. We had no budget. No budget. All right. So golden rule number 1, you can start a national day with no budget.
With no budget. Yes, that's right. So I'm an accountant. It was handy for me to be an accountant. We had the farm and the accountant and the artist. So that was a pretty good, solid sort of important three sort of wisdoms that we had in our group. Yeah. So I set up a business name called the National Regenerative Agriculture Day, and that cost $36. Yep. Right. And then and then we decided, well, obviously first we decided what would that day be, and of course 14th of February, hello, Valentines Day, you got to love your farmer. Yeah. So we just thought there was no other better day than the 14th of February. So so I just registered this business. We actually, Cal, we did do some research on how to set up a day, and there was nothing there.
There was nothing there. I found one podcast with a lady who had done it, and it was an odd one. It was about, I know it was odd, like pickles or something. It was some strange little thing. But yeah, she just basically just declared it. She just was like, right, this is the National Pickle Day. and then just started doing radio interviews about it. We're like, okay, well, we can do this. Like, and I guess when you like, the idea of a national day for us was, we're in a national drought, and everyone was really depleted in their mental health, in their resources, in their heart spaces. You know, it's a really tough gig. A drought is a really tough gig. Like, it's all about death, dying, and scarcity, and this never ending process where you have to wait for it to rain. You can't, and everything, just the debt accumulates and accumulates and accumulates. So at the peak of the drought, you know, what would be a bale of lucerne, which is what you sort of standard feed you supplement your animals with when there's, like, you're having shorter capacity with your own, like, grasses and things. That went from like $8 to, like, you know, $45, some astronomical leap. When you think farmers suddenly have to rely completely on bringing in food, that's just like a $50,000 new debt per month sort of thing. Like, it's so unbelievable to fathom. And the majority of people who aren't farmers and haven't built up that sort of staying power, they would have crumbled straight away. Like, it's just so incredibly stressful. And it's a real testimony to the farmers and their families, because man, oh man, they have a lot of resilience to get through this. And it can go on for years. You know, this particular one went on for years. So we were thinking, okay, like, if we want to bring awareness around regenerative agriculture, and we have no budget, and all we have of a few friends and family around that sort of like are in the space, you know, could we just bring them all together and just sort of like promote this concept, bring it all together and promote it? Can we illustrate it? Can we come up with an event? Can we put it out there and just trust that it will be received, and we can launch this national day? Valentine's Day was brilliant because we had a lot of fun laughing at the idea of, you know, what happens on Valentine's Day. One, chocolate is a big association with Valentine's Day, and two, diamond rings, people proposing, both of which have a really fun play with carbon. And so we were really like enjoying the way we could use Valentine's Day. And plus, you know, it's a day where a lot of people's energy and focus is on love. And it's not being utilized for the good. You know, it's not being utilized, it's being commercialized. It's basically a commercialized day of spending money. So if we could harness that energy of love your farmer and love your food and love your soil and love your country and love the future for your kids, and actually sort of hijack it, we thought, okay, this is cool and weird and interesting. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, so it's really amazing, because when we thought of the chocolate idea, we were like, okay, how can we visually explain carbon through chocolate? So we did this really cool experiment. Do you remember, Kel?
Yeah.
Okay, if you can imagine the poorest quality chocolate, and I'm just going to use names because I can.
Yeah. Well, we did this with the schools.
Yeah, we did this with the schools. So say something like the black and gold chocolate that has probably been
or Cadbury's.
Pardon?
Cadbury's. Hello.
Cadbury's. 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 So if you can think that they probably use child labor. They probably use a whole level of excess chemicals. There's no really care for landscape function or any, you know, care for the environment. So we sort of got that chocolate, and then we got a mid-range chocolate that was sort of, you know, like a fair trade chocolate. And then we went to somewhere like Alter Ego, which had where they tracked the stories of the farmers from, you know, North America, and they shared the stories and how important what the families did and how they gave them extra funding for, you know, the communities went into a co-op. And so actually we got Alter Ego as one of our sponsors for the first NRAD, and they gave us all this chocolate to share.
Yeah, because when you grow chocolate specifically in rich regenerative soils, in soils that have like been, you know, healed and are thriving and are beautiful, then it changes the quality of the chocolate. So it was a really great experiment because, you know, on one hand we've got Cadbury, the old family favorite, and then on the other hand we've got Alter Ego, which is a regenerative chocolate bar which not only supports the community, but is grown organically and in beautiful, rich soil. And we pose the question, can you taste the carbon?
So we had this it was like a 5-step or 6-step process, right, Kel? And it was like the first step, put a blindfold off. First, you got to get your mum and dad to go and buy 3 different types of chocolate, like the cheapy chocolate and the mid-range chocolate and then the alter ego. And then it was just like, okay, everyone plan to, on February the 14th, whether you're having afternoon tea, dinner, whatever, after dinner, you're going to have this little family event or community event where you can put blindfolds on and we're going to have a chocolate tasting ceremony.
Because most kids, like, I mean, obviously, say an ultra ego chocolate, that's like 90% cacao, it's like that dark, rich chocolate. And, it's most kids have never tried this sort of chocolate, they're used to that sweet manufactured taste of Cadbury's or the cheaper chocolates. And the healthier carbon rich chocolate has a very distinct whole food flavor, which we're also used to now. We if we eat the other chocolate, it's like, whoa, it's just so sickly sweet. But for a kid to try it and to recognize the difference, it really does taste like you're consuming chocolate out of the soil. Like it's got that rich.
And I remember we had that whole conversation when we so one of our showcase events for NRAD was at the farm at Byron Bay. And we talked about it, and it was just like, just imagine closing your eyes and feeling the sensation, that your taste buds, what are you sensing? So just using those visualizations of the 5 senses, like what you're seeing and what you're touching, and like that actually inspires like a conversation these kitchen table conversations that we're having around chocolate, who would have ever thought of, it just brought another layer of like, wow, this sort of is a mirroring, if you like, that whole the potential of regenerative agriculture, on so many levels.
And also, I guess for us, like, we were very interested in partnering unusual concepts with concepts. So for us to sort of look at regenerative agriculture, so far what we've got presented to us basically lives in dusty science books and, spoken sort of in much smaller groups who were very specifically engaged with it. It certainly didn't have that fun and that lightheartedness and that experimentation. And we just found, just like partnering an artist with an accountant, like you can come up with some really extraordinary things when you put contrasting elements together that you don't normally think about. So chocolate and Regen Ag became our first sort of step into exposing and playing with how fun and how we can demonstrate the difference. And so the Great Chocolate Experiment was our first thing. Now, bear in mind that we had no budget. So for us to launch a national day, we had to come up with a way that it would basically cost no money to present an idea and have people engage with it. And, go and buying 2 blocks of chocolate was a really fun way of doing that. Also a way to inspire people's imaginations, because of course we understand that our imaginations in relationship to the future and problem solving is really important. And a big push with where we've gone with NRAD and Carbonate is to have people become aware that low nutritional food, so start with the drought. NRAD started with the drought. Bad soil, and you're going to be wiped out by a drought. Bad soil is created by chemicals and industrial chemical farming. And that poisons our food. So where we've gone to now is a much more in-depth understanding of the results of that poisoned food, like low nutritional food. And one of the big ones is it actually shrinks the part of your brain that's responsible for your imagination, and which has given birth to the What If department here at Carbonate. But what's so important about that is when you're applying an idea like the National Regen Ag Day or a national day in general, you want to be living the end result. So for us, it was okay, if we're going to problem solve the future, if we're going to find solutions here, if we're going to be innovative with how we approach this with no budget, if we're going to take that flying leap, you have to use our imaginations. And to us, that is as important because that's the biodiversity of your mind. And without that beautiful thing going on in your mind, like really, what else is relevant? I mean, we can fix the soil, but until we're starting to dream it forward into the future of what is its potential, what does it look like to live in a world with beautiful, high nutritional food, and poisoning our food chain is a standard crime against humanity. You wouldn't even dream of doing it. Like, that's the sort of world we want to live in, right? So anyway, so back to NRAD, we came up with something that was in our heads, affordable for everyone, really fun, really creative, and basically got people talking about carbon for the first time in many people's lives. Like, they didn't know about carbon. Right now, we've all hearing carbon with this net zero topic that's just like, you know, it's starting to really filter down through our culture. But back then, carbon was just something you heard about in year 8 science class and never spoke the world ever again, even though it's the building block of all life. So here we are on one hand now in this complicated dynamic where carbon's become the enemy of the state. And at the same time, carbon is the building block of life. And to heal soil, you want carbon. It's all about the magic of carbon being back in that soil. It's certainly not our enemy. So we loved that we kicked off conversation around carbon, backed by a love heart, backed by the day of love, backed by hijacking Valentine's Day. So for us, that all sort of synced in really well. And for anyone who's got a topic out there they're passionate about and want to launch a national day, you just got to find those little ingredients, those little variables that support what it is that you love about your topic, you know, how you can bring in some creative thinking here, because at the end of the day, all it's about is getting people to talk. Like, at the end of the day, it's just about starting that conversation, getting those, because words are spells. So getting those words out there, you know, putting them out there. Like, that was our first real thing, wasn't it? You organized an event, Miss McCosker. Miss McCosker does events.
Yeah.
Well, that was going to be my question. What was one of the first events that you ran for NRAD, and what was the response like?
Yeah, so it actually took off really well. We just we wanted to be really, like, we didn't want to get bogged on having to organize all these events across Australia. So we just we did a Facebook campaign, free, obviously, just to say February the 14th, I think it started in November, right? We said, okay, we're announcing the National Regenerative Agriculture Day, and you can put on an event. You can be, and this is where we started looking at who's our audience, right? So community gardens, farmers markets, obviously farmers themselves, our land care groups that are already sort of scheduling in some events in the February time period. So I just got in touch so what we did was we just went to land care, for example. If you've got an event around February, can you please schedule it in for the week of February the 14th, and just tag National Regenerative Agriculture Day. And so that just meant we had this really wonderful, I've got an event around that same time. So we ended up having nearly 18 events, like, in the first year.
Wow.
It was pretty cool. Like, and even like, it was really funny. Even in the last year when we were walking around, you know, we'd be at a function or talking to farmers and be like, oh yeah, we did a kitchen table conversation on about National Regeneration that no one even knew, that we were just sharing within the family. So that word of mouth actually was very inspiring. Like, so the creativity side actually obviously made an impact. So in terms of when you're thinking about a day, just drilling down, really just understanding who your audience needs to be. Yeah. And I think, look, one of the things that probably we did do wrong was because we were working 24/7. We were so excited about what we were doing. So our audience is probably a bit large. So we were sort of, rather than saying this year, we're just going to focus on this group. So we had this big plan of let's get to our restaurateurs, because they could actually, you know, obviously restaurants during Valentine's Day, everyone goes and has a romantic dinner. So so that's probably one thing that I would suggest, that you just focus on maybe one or two of your audience rather than trying to get
I don't know, Miss McCosker. I don't know if I agree. Like when we started this, you know, we had a massive wide net because the first year is listen, everyone, if you're going to do this, the first year is the best year because you're so fresh and sparkly and you've got so much energy and you're willing to try everything and you're like right in there. And by year 4, you don't quite have that sparkly energy anymore. And it's like become a little bit more routine, you know. So the first year is your experiment. And I remember we were like, we're going to get 1 million Aussies across Australia. We just had this big random lofty goal, 1 million Aussies across Australia to participate in National Regeneration. We're like 360 field days, you know, 82 community gardens, you know, 1,000 kitchen table conversations, 500 restaurants. Like we just like set this sort of goal. And of course we didn't reach any of that goal. But what happened was we just drew on the community that was around us. Miss McCosker just called everyone and just spoke to them and said, you know, we're going to do this, and just saw how it sort of played out. And of course we came off the tail end of the drought. So Australia's consciousness was already leaning on what was happening with our farms. And so they were very hearty and heartfelt and interested in, you know, how can we support solving drought? How can we support solving, you know, this crisis our farmers in? And then as a happy byproduct, like let's learn about our food chain and where it comes from and how we make it. And, you know, is it actually good or not? And can we improve on it? So yeah, we just sort of like came up with these lofty tangents or sparkly new and just went like, cool, let's do that. And then
the other thing that is really great is to get volunteers to support. So have a bit of a plan on how you can support volunteers. Like obviously we just learned as we were going, and it was all a bit crazy. But I just remember a conversation that I had with a beautiful woman when I was down in Sydney. She was actually a journalist, and we sat down and she just wanted to know about National Regen Ag Day and had heard it through the net. She'd liked the Facebook page, and she was a mum. They had 2 young children and a journalist from Sydney, and Mike and I had a meeting with her, and she said, tell me about regenerative agriculture. She had no idea. So we just gave her the really amazing things about how when you increase your carbon in the soil and you get the ground cover, it actually creates all this incredible diversity, increases your, you know, all of that nutrient density and incredible effect on your biodiversity on your farm. It stops soil erosion. You know, it makes our rivers and lakes clear because we're not smashing, you know, all. And she actually just started to cry. She said, oh my God, I thought that we would only have 10 years left and there were no solutions to anything that was going on. And she said, I can't believe this is just going to gives us all hope. And I think that was the other focus that we really wanted to really bring out, that regenerative agriculture is like, it's the hope. It's the thing that gives everyone hope. And even when you're smashed in a drought, you can still understand what the things are that are needed to get farmers into regenerative agriculture. And it starts with our foodies. Like, how amazing is that?
Well, that was going to be one of my questions. And I think that's a nice lead in. You guys started in the country where your farms were, but there's so many people living in our cities that now want to be involved more. So how can we get involved and really carry this message forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, when we started NRAD, we didn't even have a Facebook page. And so I just went nuts making illustrations and memes about carbon. And that was our first platform that allowed us to be in contact with our city friends. You know, like we didn't have any other way of doing that. So the social media for that connection was really powerful for us. Do I love social media? Absolutely not. I can't stand it. I am so in conflict with this idea that we must have a second life thriving behind everything we do. It drives me nuts. I think the ascended version of all this is practical application and actually putting into wisdom by doing something. But like social media at the time for us was really powerful, and I wasn't sick of it yet. And it was something that we could really harness using the creativity and the messaging. So our socials went from 0 to like, 12,000 really quickly.
I think
And
7,000 was our first year. Like we
yeah.
had, it was pretty. And then I think that because of the way that we shared the awareness and communication, it was just like, this is, what is regenerative agriculture? So we talked firstly about what the farmers could do, but then we tried to always have a conversation about, as a city person, as a foodie, what is it that we can do? Actually start with, let's just buy us some seeds and put them in your backyard. Get the kids involved to actually grow and experience what it is to connect back to nature. Yeah. Like that was the thing that every single person could do. You could just go and buy a pack of seeds, put them in the ground, water them, just watch nature just emerge into, and even if it wasn't veggies, or if it was just flowers, so that was the other thing about Valentine's Day. Well, of course, flowers, and kids always love the, and you've got to choose seeds that will be quick, that fast food thing to start with. So we just recommended little seeds that would be beautiful for the kids and even pot plants if you don't have a backyard, just, so that was another way to just get people engaged in a conversation of, keeping it.
Yeah, I mean, we really did. We put out we put out a lot of resources. So we said, okay, like if you're in the cities, like number one, like have a dinner party and bring it up as a dinner party conversation. That's like so easy for you to do and so interesting, And so we put together a whole pile of conversation starters. We said, if you're in the city and you want to learn more about this or just be proactive in supporting this, like go and buy your food from farmers markets or community gardens and understand the difference between what it is when you eat a Woolworths carrot and what it is when you eat a carrot from a community garden. Go and taste the difference. Like we were really big about going to taste it, like engaging your 5 senses, like getting out of this sort of like, it's all online, watching stuff, knowledge theoretical, like, the second life online stuff, it has no sensory input, but you can go and taste the difference. So we were very, we're working with what we knew people had in their resource kit without having to do much. Yeah. So that was our big push. And then over the
other reasons, Kel, remember we did all the resources for schools.
Yeah.
So we started engaging the schools. So what was quite incredible at the same time was that a wonderful friend of ours, Kate Spry, she's a teacher down in southern New South Wales. She had actually put together off her own bat a regenerative curriculum. So they're regenerative farmers, and she was seeing what was being taught in schools around agriculture, and she was just so frustrated by the old paradigm. There was nothing for kids. So she put together with Kiss the Ground over in the US. They worked initially. Kiss the Ground had done a curriculum, and Kate Aussified it. And so we actually launched the curriculum on National Regenerative Agriculture Day. And so as part of the resources into schools, we did a whole heap of posters and did some experiments. So there was this really cool experiment that was like, Kel, you remember that one with the different types of soil. So you can get really crappy soil, just the cheapest soil that you can buy, and you put it into a bucket, like a half,
it's just a container where you can put the soil in, 3 different versions of soil, from the regenerative highest form to the red dirt drought
and so
soil.
One had a lot of ground cover. So what you do is you actually plant out a really rich, massive seed so that the ground cover is really thick, to just a general one sort of variety of seed, so just a grass seed. And then the other one was just nothing. There was no ground cover whatsoever. And then what you did was you poured water through each 3 of them, and you could then actually measure to see down the bottom where the water drained through the bucket. You could actually see the contents that were in the water, and like it was so visual, because obviously the water and then you could also time how quickly the water ran through. So obviously the dirt that didn't have any ground cover at all went straight through, and it was really brown, like it had washed, all the dirt had washed through. And then the one that had was really active with all of the different seeds and the ground cover. When the water was poured in through that bucket, it was clear, and it came through slowly.
Yeah.
So that was just like a really wonderful way for schools to actually sort of start engaging in that regenerative agriculture. So there was some really understanding then, well, the container that had all of the seeds in it with all of the biodiversity in it, that's where you get your carbon from. So it's actually not too hard to understand it if you can.
Well, because our first big push with when we were in the drought and we were coming up with, how do we solve this, was like water infiltration. So we started to look and we came up with this fantastic model working with Mike. So we did all the maths on it. And with the Australian we could take a hectare of land and a rainfall event at 1% carbon in the ground, which is that sort of ground is when it's droughty and cracked and, there's no life. And you see that total desertification thing that was happening in rural Australia at the time. When you have a rainfall event on that ground at 1% carbon, and then you take an analogy of the Australian swimming pool, it fills up a quarter of a swimming pool. Like the ground will hold a quarter of a swimming pool of water. The rest of it runs off because it's like hitting cement. And so it runs off, and then you get like all your topsoil just running away from your farm. And that's when you get like flooding out, and this is like, it can rain, but the ground can't hold the water. And then if you increase it to 5% carbon, so much more organic life in the soil, the same rainfall event, the same size, then that swimming pool fills up one whole swimming pool and a quarter. And if you increase it to 8%, you get 3 swimming pools full of water, same rainfall event, same size. It goes from a quarter of an Australian swimming pool to 3 full swimming pools plus some, because the ground can hold the water. And so if you're a farmer in rural Australia, you can actually drought proof your property by healing your soil. And that was a revelation for us. We were like, oh my God, this does not have to be the Australian story, forever and ever. If you are a farmer that's like aligned with this information, and that information allows you to heal your soil. So when it does rain, your soil holds that water. And when it doesn't rain, your soil holds the water still, and it doesn't like get all dried out and moves into desertification. It actually has a sustainable, sovereign nature to it that allows it to get through these wetter times and these dry times. It's like the perfect balancer. And then, of course, if you include, and which you must include, no bare soil, like cover crops in all capacity, like that's the rule of Regen Ag, no bare soil. So when kids are at school, they get taught about industrial farming, that method. They get taught about plowing up the soil and clearing the soil of all things to plant the new seeds. And that model is very, I would say, archaic in comparison to what regenerative agriculture is talking about, which is not a new science. That's the irony. We're going from the way farming used to be before industrial agriculture sort of presented itself and, rotated around chemical dependency into back to that same method 200 years on, 300 years on, where we're returning to like the most natural, sensical, makes so much sense when you look at it and know the knowledge, farming. So, and of course, means our food's not poisoned, which of course eradicates about 90% of all of the health and emotional, mental ailments that we suffer from in this culture. So that little experiment that Helen was talking about sort of summed all of that information up in basically like, a 1-minute visual that allowed younger people to understand what, instead of just reading about carbon in science books, they can actually see it with their own eyes, So I guess for us, we just basically tried to simplify every concept that was the main principles of Regen Ag, whether it be through memes and posters and art from my desk, or it be events, experiments, and networking from Helen's desk, and also from Mike's knowledge on the topic. And let's bring it down to the smallest, most heartiest illustrations on the topic. And you don't need many resources to do that. And then drawing from the community that's already around you. And it's excellent if you have a networker in your team, Miss McCosker, amazing networker, loves being on that phone. Artists hate being on the phone. So having that person who was willing to, make the phone calls and go and have the meetings and follow it up and let all those synchronistic events happen and sort of, bothered to sit down with people and talk about it. You can really draw and create an amazing capacity with almost no resources at all, a mobile phone. And people just sort of like flocked to the idea. They could see how intelligent it was. They really cared about the future. They really cared about the health of their families and children. And all of those variables came together, which is always what happens if it's a good idea, right? The truth always surfaces. They all came together, and we actually hosted our very first event. So alongside inviting the community to participate by hosting their own event, whether it be dinner kind of conversation or a field day or a farming event or whatever, we just became like the platform that could sync all those events up and present it as one united front, which of course we all are in this movement, one united front. And to Australia's credit, like they have really our predecessors, the ones that have come before us have like led the way in regenerative agriculture and high vibing farming methods, permaculture, all sorts of beautiful techniques. So much has come out of Australia. So much of the foundational principles of these techniques have come from Australians.
Yeah, I think that was probably the other thing that we actually also managed to. We spent a lot of time on finding out what are the key sort of areas of regenerative agriculture that people aren't even aware of. So the multi-species crops and holistic grazing, and so we put those all into some really cool graphics. And I think what we'll do with this podcast is we'll put all of these wonderful graphics and the links to the Regen curriculum, the Regenerative Agriculture curriculum. We'll do that, and we'll give those to Kelly, because Kelly's going to do an awesome write-up on all of this, so you can have the visuals of seeing all of this amazing stuff. But one of the things with a national day is to have, even if you plan one showcase event, so you can put all your energy to so you're launching the day, you're interviewing people. We had a whole range of podcasts who were interviewing, and Charlie Arnott, he was our MC for our first and National Regenerative Agriculture Day. And look, he is like the rock star of Regen. He's like the pin-up, we call him the pin-up boy of Regen.
Pin-up boy.
But his story of like saying, well, and this is so beautiful. Like he talks about how, well, everyone knows, when you get sick, your doctor. How often do you go and see your doctor? Is it once a month? Is it once every 6 months? And how often do you eat food? Like what, 3 times a day, 5 times a day? Do you know your farmer? Do you know your farmer? So, those conversations are really engaging. Where does my food come? Who is my farmer? And, every one of us can actually be a farmer. We can actually learn how to grow our own food in our own backyards and get to understand what it is that connecting to nature, how incredibly important is, not even from the level of making sure that we're eating healthy food and we're looking after a landscape, but the way that we are in our community and the way that we interact. Like everyone knows when you go to your local community gardens, it's like that thing of, it's so good to see everyone and like see these bags with these, kale and spinach popping out of all of their bags. So, and it's just such a wonderful way to meet people, and it's part of being in community and on community. So I think that's the other aspect of the National Regenerative Agriculture Day, that we would never ever intended it just to be about farmers,
No, it's definitely draws on community. And I guess for us, we didn't take the day from the perspective of rallying against anything. Like we didn't take the day as we weren't thinking about it so much as activism. We were thinking about it more in the presentation that, like, here's the problem, how do we solve it? Let's all do this together as a community. It wasn't about, here's the enemy, how do we go to war against them? How do we protest against something? We were like, how do we champion for something? And that was a really big difference with, our approach. Because like Helen and I and Mike, we are activists, like that's our heart, but we don't really put our, and I guess with the creativity for us, it was about bringing that community presentation, that community template to it. It was about offering a solution that was so beautiful and so smart that, you know, whoever learnt about it just loved it, and whoever, you know, took the time to align with it just like thrived because of it. It was, the solution itself was enough for us. We weren't there to sort of you know, present the enemy of all of this. You know, what's the tail end of poisoning our food chain? Who did that? Why did they do that? Why is that just integrated into our culture? Which would have been fun, and I would have enjoyed that, to be honest. But like, it's very different when you look at the heart of the matter, you know.
Yeah.
So we realized that earth and heart all had the word art in that, and we realized that art is just so often in these really powerful words that we work with around the farming space. So we followed the art.
Yeah. And then last year we actually, our theme, so we always try, I think also when you have a day, you should have a theme every year that's a little bit different, right? So last year our theme was about sacred regeneration, where we actually brought in our Indigenous communities as much as we could. And that was just an incredible event that
Let's talk about the beginning of that. Where did the word sacred? That was interesting how that came about.
Yeah, so I think we had I think the second Regenerative of Agriculture Day in our website, we had mentioned the word sacred.
I'd written a prayer.
Yes, Kelly had written a prayer. And we did get a bit of pushback about it, you know. So, and I totally get that. Like, it's a very, you know, if you look at our audience, it's very you know, you've got very conservative people, and you've also got, you know, the greenies, and you've got like a real mix in between. So it was a bit of a trigger point for some to say, well, you know, if you want to do a particular thing around sacred, well, that's a little bit edgy. But we actually let it go, and then we decided, well, how about if we could? And there's even in the last 2 years, we've noticed such a shift of people connecting to country. Like, it's really been noticeable, just like supporting our Indigenous communities. That probably wasn't such a big, like, and you know, with all of the movement around understanding, you know, what country you're from, and so there had been a bit of a movement around that. So last year we decided, well, we're going to do an event called Sacred Regeneration, and it was fantastic, amazing.
We got beautiful.
Yeah, it was really, we got to, so we ended up doing an event at Newrybar Hall, which is just near Byron Bay. And what was quite stunning, without us knowing, was that the border of two tribes was at Newrybar, and they had never really come together in a way that would facilitate a whole community experience of Indigenous and non-Indigenous. And so we put on this beautiful event where we did a choir piece of music, but we had a ceremony, welcome to country at the beginning, and we managed to get Uncle Lewis Walker he was from near Jabulum village. We got Nellie, grandmother Nellie, who is from Uluru, and she was there. And we had some, like, I think there were about 30 of our Indigenous community came to this event, this dinner event.
Which never happened before. Not integrated with our farmers and our foodies. It just had never happened before.
Yeah. So it was quite an extraordinary, like, it was and it was a mix of, like, it was really sacred. The presence and the sense of it was actually a real acknowledgement of our Indigenous. Like, there was all of the non-Indigenous community that was there were in, like, deep respect, in awe, because we had, like, did this sacred ceremony, and then we had the Uncle Louis did this incredible didge with anyway, it was just an extraordinary experience. It was one of those things.
It's what was interesting about that, and I would say this is an interesting part of when you do something like a national day, is that when we first started day one, so we opened up the Facebook page, and then we built a website, and like we just did a Wix website, and it was, I don't know what it cost us, like $58 a year or something, and that's what we started with. And when because the three of us are very spiritual beings. Like, we didn't come to this work without that background. Like, hello, you got to have a lot of hardiness inside yourself to, give up your day and night with no income whatsoever to facilitate an idea because you believe it's going to help so much. And you have a God nature to you, if that's the case. Like, yes, you may also, appreciate the science of the matter, but like, you have to have that God presentation in you. So to me, and when we look at nature, we're not just looking at nature from a science biology book. We're seeing sacred life in it. We're seeing a sacred energy. We're seeing ancestral energy. We're seeing sovereignty. We're seeing a whole play out of the spiritual realm that we still don't really understand, So when we went to contain our website within the vessel of prayer, it was like very authentic to the three of us and made a lot of sense. Of course, we would start on that space. Of course, we would welcome everyone with the intention of that sacred energy. And when we got the pushback, it came from our scientists who could not relate to the idea of us adding a spiritual nature to our interest and promotion of regenerative agriculture, or just agriculture in general, And I believe to this day that we made a big mistake there, because although it ended up being great timing in how it played out, but to me, it's always a gripe, because you are the original seed intention. The founders are. Whoever was the one that starts the idea is the original seed foundation of that idea. You hold that source key knowledge. And it is very true of the three founders that we hold the word sacred always in what we do. It's very true. So when we took it away from the regen space and said, okay, the audience, we're getting too much pushback, they're not ready for this, I feel like we made a mistake. I would have integrated the truth of our authentic nature from the beginning with no apologies. As it was.
Yes, I think that's a really good point, Carl, because I think if you are going to set up a day, you need to be brave and courageous and know that, you might get some pushback or whatever, but just hold true to it. And I think that I don't think we didn't lose by saying we're not going to do the sacred, using that word, but I think it actually to put the I think it gave us a lot of extra depth to leave it a little bit, to let NRAD grow, and then to bring it last year when it was such amazing timing. So, but I think that's one thing that we should share, that there is a bit of courage in announcing a day.
It is. I mean, it did my head in. Like, it did my head in, because, I'm all about like staying true to your truth. And so when we took it away, I was like, I'm just being honest in this interview. I got a bit bored. Because it wasn't integrating all that I could integrate. It wasn't integrating, the beautiful artwork with the sacred quality that was so important to how it was true for me. So, and I never forgot that moment. It's been a pinnacle moment for me. And I really have a big, conflict around that topic. And it's hard, isn't it? Because we have these second lives which like are meant to like appeal to everyone, and if you don't appeal to everyone, which means your message has become deeply generic and not in any way confronting, and if you don't appeal to everyone and upset enough people, like you have to like conform. It's all about conform. But actually the reality is, the real genius, the real heart comes out when you're just being original, authentic, and yourselves. And if the audience drops away, then they're not a frequency match for you. That's okay, because there is a whole pile of people out there that definitely will be. And so when we decided to like make good of that mistake, we launched NRAD last year as a sacred regeneration event, and we were unapologetic about it. And as a result, that event was just historical and beautiful, and really has led the way to the rise of our sovereigns in 2022 as they convoy on Canberra in this very moment in time. And the rising of that sovereignty with our original people is so key to the success of regenerative agriculture into our future, because, and we've integrated it strongly, like with carbonate and what is going alongside NRAD. The certification process that we're innovating includes knowing who were the original owners of your land as a farmer, and integrating knowledge of natural law, sovereign law. Because what's the point of regenerative agriculture at the end of the day? It's for a farmer to become sovereign again. It's for a farmer to become independent of chemical farming, where they are dependent on this awful cyclic poison. It's about individual families and mothers and consumers to become sovereign again, knowing that they have the right to choose food that has no poison in it, that they have the right to choose food that's labeled with poison if it's got poison in it. That's sovereignty. So the relationship between, and healing our communities and our land, that's an act of sovereignty. That's sacred work. When you look at healing the soil cycle, the water cycle, that's sacred work. And like, it's time for the communities that work within the regenerative space to integrate the language of its highest form. So to us, that is where we're definitely heading into the future of the National Regenerative Agriculture Day.
That's what I love about Carbonate and NRAD, is that it's not just integrating the science, it's starting to bring science and spirituality back together again. And one of the things going to help us heal here in Australia is bringing the First Nations people back to give us, well, not give us, to share and to lead that knowledge. And we walk with them or behind them with that knowledge. So I think that's really beautiful. And the space that I work in, when people become connected to their environment, they get better. And something you both repeated consistently throughout our conversation is healing. And I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because you mentioned a number of other issues that occurred within the communities around drought. And now that you're 4 years on with NRAD, and apparently we're on the other side of the drought, how did the healing occur? And have you seen healing occur through this movement? And of course, it's a dynamic process and would still be occurring. How do you envisage that going forward?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I think, look, I just remember when, you know, if I just come back to when we did our big community event in our little community, where when we spent so long, this event of getting all of the community involved in a big concert to get them into the arts and music. And it was a really hard slog. Like, it took 6 months to plan, and we had musicians coming from all over Australia. And we got, I think it was a sold out concert. And the next day we had 30 people come to volunteer to help clean up. And our little town is a hall. So that, if you think about the percentage of our population, like, that would be like 60% of the whole community coming to help clean up after an event. Like, and the thing that was so amazing was that process stayed with you, like it wasn't just like the week later going, oh, that was such a great event. It actually was like the coming together and the deep understanding that when we all come together, we can actually really make that the whole focus on resilience. So if you look at the soil and the healing that's going on in the soil, you know, when you've got diversity, I look at a monoculture crop where everyone's standing 1.5 meters apart, and they're all very unhappally, and they've
social
been given
distancing crops.
So those socially distanced plants. I'm being a little bit cheeky here.
It's true.
Socially distanced plants compared to a thriving community, where when you have thriving soil, you don't get sick.
Yeah.
You don't get sick when you have plants. Don't get sick when they have thriving soil. So if we take that to a community experience of a thriving community, and you've got a virus, or you've got a virus in the soil, it doesn't exist in a thriving environment. So I think that whole healing thing is so beautiful on so many levels, and you can take it where you're at. you can take that healing where you're at. You know, you can take it from the perspective of the soil, or you can take it from the perspective of your family, or you can take it from the perspective of your community, or all of your whole country. You know, that's the beauty of regenerative agriculture and regenerative communities, I think.
Yeah.
That you just take it where you can, where you're at. And that's what's so beautiful about National Regenerative Agriculture Day, that you come on the journey, and if something's a little bit, you can actually reframe it so that it is acceptable to you. So I think that aspect of healing is really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. And our very first, the very first statement or mission statement was healing the heart of the food chain. Like that was our first thing. So, you know, when you go through drought and then you start to investigate like the solutions to it, you really understand how much needs healing. Like you really get a big grasp of how, you know, it's like your blinkers are off and you're not just content now just to go to Woolworths and it's just always there. This food's always there, you know. You start to go through, and I guess the drought was really powerful like that because it really brought a lot of people's attention, whether you're in the city watching it on the news or if you're living it as a farmer. It brought a lot of people's attention to the fact that we have to heal something here or it's not going to get better. So it was a beautiful initial response coming out of a horrible natural disaster. As far as moving through that journey over the last 4 years, I mean, we can testify that, and this isn't because of us, this is because we also just participated in an uprising of a consciousness. And that uprising has pushed regenerative agriculture into the mainstream so powerfully. Like, even if you're a fifth generational farmer who would refuse to acknowledge there's another way, or you're in debt and it's too stressful to acknowledge there's another way, like even those farmers now know a friend or a neighbor who's just read a book, who has examined or explored the concept of regenerative agriculture. Basically, in the last 4 years, everyone is talking about it from all the angles, from the angle of climate change, and it being such a powerful solution with getting carbon into, you know, back down and into the soil again, from the perspective, and I'm not into climate change, putting that on the record, but there's beautiful positive elements that come out of everything. And it put an amazing flame under everyone's asses as they really wanted to come in and regenerate the earth really quickly. You know, how can we find the most powerful solution to this really quickly? And of course, it's, you know, it's agriculture. And so that really has facilitated so much healing, so much good work and effort from students and community groups and activists all around the world. And farmers suddenly all know someone who knows what this word is. It's like the buzzword, like, what is this thing called regenerative agriculture? And city people have started to become really conscious that there's actually different outlets now that they can make choices and choose an option about how they want to support their farmers. Like, it's not just like, oh my God, there's a drought on, like, where can we send our food package? No, it's like, well, this organization's doing something here, and this organization's doing something here, and this documentary is covering it here. And, you know, there's all these avenues for people to funnel financial support and have some involvement in that. And the community gardens and farmers markets have exploded in the last 2 years, and especially with the pressures of COVID and all of that energy around feeling sick and wanting to be sovereign about how you know, care for your body with this threatening, you know, virus floating around. Like, so many people are now really tuned into what they're eating and where it's coming from and how it's grown. So world events from all different angles over the last 4 years has conspired, I love a good conspiracy, has conspired to bring regenerative agriculture into the consciousness of so many new people. And as a result of that, NRAD and Carbonate have just grown to be one of those beautiful organizations that is facilitating an avenue to solving that. So the evolution of NRAD as a day became, all right, so if we want to have this beautiful platform where we're educating people and giving this information out, how can people support it further? So then we're like, how can we create a fundraising platform that can also help powerfully transition farmers to regenerative agriculture? So for us, to answer your question, very powerfully long way here, for the last 4 years, for us personally, because we can only really speak from our personal experience, we've evolved NRAD to innovate in carbonate, and carbonate function is to take what NRAD started to educate people on and put it into a practical application that allows not only people to participate and donate. By the way, everyone, $8 a month goes a long way. Donate to carbonate, and from that we have been able to build an organization from scratch that's ultimate goal is to transition farmers to regen ag, and ultimately to innovate a regenerative agriculture certification, food certification, which will enable us to bring that certification to supermarkets and acknowledge farmers who are doing that work, and allowing the consumer to really understand what their food's doing on a really powerful level. So for us personally, it evolved a lot. And I guess that is a sign of a good evolution, because we didn't just stick with NRAD. We didn't just sit there at that point. We kept asking, now what? Now
and
what?
We keep on asking, now what?
Yeah,
we keep on asking.
I know.
Now we have a board of 8 of us, and committee. We've set up all of our committees, and we want to really quickly scale. So we're really wanting volunteers, and we're wanting to really deeply understand. Like, for regenerative agriculture is our pattern integrity of how we can really transform on so many levels. So farmers signing up to carbonate, just jump on our website. If you want to donate, you can go to our website, carbonate.org.au. And leading up to NRAD, if there's we've got our website as well, Kel,
www.nrad.org.au.
And that website's been such a work in progress. Every year it's like we start a new website for the day, and then this year we're just like, nah, this has to be an ongoing website. It has to have content all year round. It has to become that platform. And so we've sort of launched it with the writing department involved. And this year it will be about getting content every couple of days through and providing an amazing resource. So we're building on it as opposed to just being once a year. So we're evolving. We are evolving, and our community is evolving, and the resources and structure around the ideas evolving. And ultimately, you just got to keep asking, what next? Now what next? Now what? And like basically drive your board crazy, like, because the board just wants you to just let's get this right. Let's get this working and moving.
Our governance sorted. Let's get our reporting done. Where's your report?
I know. And Helen and I like, but now what, universe? Now what? Like, what amazing new direct synchronicity are you going to line up for us? What meeting, what event, what people, place, thing, time, and event's going to happen that's going to take us over here and freak everyone out? Like, and that's the point of all this. You can't you got to stay in that light-hearted living life. Like, you can't control how your crop's going to look at the end of the day when you spread out 10,000 various seeds and plants. You don't even know what's going to happen. Like biodiversity, you don't know what bugs are going to be there. Butterfly, you don't know. It's like a wild, chaotic garden, and like, to me, that's the energy you've got to stay with. Like, if it gets too monocultured in your process, too repetitive, too governed, too managed, then it kills that life force, that chaotic energy where you surprising things can happen, and new elements and people and meetings, and you don't know what's going to happen. But that's quite a masterful thing to do, because like, people want to get it organized and managed, and the freaking manual written, and the everyone's jobs described, and like, which is kind of like returning to industrial farming in some metaphoric way. Whereas like wild and organic,
and important, Kelly Jones,
and important, Miss McCosker, yep, very important. But like, maybe that's where you've got to bring in the right people to do that side of things, and potentially it's probably not the founders' like natural wildness that needs to be like always free to be a little bit wild and chaotic, because that's the joy of life. That's what happens when you're not on Second Life and in Facebook land, It's just messy out there, and that's the fun.
Yeah. And I've got to say, Kelly, it's been an absolute delight. We're always interviewing people, and this is like we've been one of the first where we're being interviewed. So thank you. You've been a legend.
You're welcome. I think what's beautiful, I think we're reaching our organic, natural conclusion there. But I'm a scientist and I'm very spiritual, and I have experienced what you described, where people look at you like you have two heads when you're describing something scientific, and you said there is something else here. There is a miracle here in this connection. And I think what you've both described in the interconnectedness that we have with our soil, that we have with our people, that we have with our ancestors, that we have with our communities, and what we've seen happen on a global scale over the last 2 years, where we weren't allowed to move and we weren't allowed to be in community, that this is so important. And I think people could maybe appreciate a little bit more now that miracle and that awness that is in that connection to other people, and then to the food that is coming into our body. What you have described is ecology. Yeah. You've described all the populations of the different types of species within a community, like
and entropy.
That's right. Like, and what I think,
symphony of sound and clashing of everything.
I want the audience to understand, if you go back and you look at history, because our history is not that old. Western civilization is not that old. You go back not that far. Like if you just look at our First Nations and what they were doing on this land only 233 years ago, it's completely different. They worked with the environment. They had that spiritual connection. Every time you talk to an Indigenous elder, they lead with that spiritual connection. Science and spirituality were born together. And that's why I feel like the National Regenerative Agriculture Day, Carbon 8 is going to be the leading charity driving this amazing renaissance that we're going to have with glorious food. Like we get to taste this and we get to see it. So thank you very, very much for sharing this wonderful story. And you did mention there how people can get involved, but I'll just summarize. You can go to the nrad.org.au website, all the social media channels there if you want to follow along. But the NRAD website, as Kelly just mentioned, is going to have some amazing content forevermore, I've decided. Art and writing on a myriad of different topics, because of course we're a community and there's all different people that make up that community, and that's diversity, that's biodiversity. Yeah. And I'm describing the ecological laws here. You can't have our environment without all this, and we're part of it. So thank you very, very much for sharing your wisdom and your passion and your vision with everyone here today.
Thanks again.
14th of February.
14th of February.
Let me wait before we log off, I just want to summarize the steps one must take if they want to do a national day.
Please do. Yes.
All right. So 1, have your idea. Usually around a kitchen table.
Register a business name for $36 online.
2, register your business name. 3, register your little website, and it doesn't have to be complicated. They're so automatic right now. You can build them. Anyone can build them. So, and then find your audience. You probably already worked that out. So that one's easy. Yes. And that can usually do by setting up some form of social media. And so start your social media.
To fundraise. It's important that you don't just burn yourself out and not get paid. Like Kelly and I didn't get paid for 2 years. So really important that you find an avenue to get some money in to support you, because it's really important to build capacity in your organization. You need
So the key to that, it may take a little while, but the key to that was networking and drawing on your community that's already there, that's already around you, that may already be interested in what you're wanting to achieve. Have conversations with them, have meetings with them, and see how they can, interconnect with you and foster something that's going to be supported to your resources and capacity, and then decide on your key event.
Yep. And also draw on your own experience, because that is gold.
Stay authentic and original to who you are, no matter what. no matter what, and then have your key event, and then send out a press release to the media and local journalists, because the local newspapers and journalism are always keen to pick up on it, invite people to come and podcast the event, and, you know, draw on the ease today of all that social media content that can be made very easily from your phone. And then just go to the event and see what happens. And something we didn't.
Sorry, you go, Cal. I'll say the final thing.
Okay. Well, I would just, all right, no, you go, because we'll have a final list.
Yes. Be courageous. Be courageous and just stick to your guns and stick to what you really believe is the right thing to do in your heart, because that is the thing that will move mountains.
Yes. And just to end the whole story, so was it last year or the year before? In the last 24 months, we got an email from someone who said, do you know that NRAD has been put through Parliament? It's now declared an official Australian day. And we were like, what? And so someone, the Greens had someone within the Green Community Party had taken the National Regenerative Agriculture into Parliament, had offered it up as a national day. It had been agreed upon and is now formally acknowledged as Australia's National Regenerative Agriculture Day on the 14th of February. And that all happened. We had no idea. We didn't do anything about that. That just happened because the day is worth celebrating and important to the future of Australia. So that all happened, and now we are formally standing here with a formal official, I don't know what, like like having our government supported, I don't know. But anyway, like the point is that we now can say we have an official national day, and anyone can do this. Anyone can do this with under $100. And that should be the title of the article: how to create a national day for under $100.
All right, beautiful women. We will sign off for today. Thanks very much for watching. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day. 1 week to go.
Woohoo.